Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It is exactly 9:51 a.m. We are now joined by Advocate Brenda Madumise. She is the director for Wise for Africa. And obviously, we are looking at the issue of the 16 days of no violence against women and children, which we know kicked off a few days ago and will be ending on the 10th of December. A very good morning to you, Advocate. Welcome to the program. Nice to be speaking with you this morning.
Good morning, and thanks for having me.
Okay, so you are with Wise for Africa. Let's understand what exactly is it that you do and how Wise for Africa can make a difference and hone in on the issue of gender-based violence.
Wise for Africa is a non-profit organization established to address gender inequalities, discrimination, and look at solutions that advance women's empowerment. And in that basket of what I've just said, we address gender-based violence in all its forms. So what we do is advocacy work. We challenge power in how power is structured in this country, how power manifests itself in our daily lives, and how that power continuously discriminates against women and leads to violence. We also do take up strategic litigation cases where we want to advance a feminist jurisprudence in taking up cases that really tackle patriarchy, tackle power, tackle inequalities, so that then we can start to have a society that is based on humanity, not based on violence, not based on inequality, not based on discrimination. So we address all those issues.
How do we, I'm hearing so many different groups and advocacy groups and people that are so passionate about the issues around gender-based violence. We've been talking about this for many years, and rightly so, and we should not stop talking about it. Are we seeing a difference? Are we seeing change? And are we seeing the perpetrators being re-socialized? Because that is the key, is it not?
What is happening in this country since 2018? I mean, you would appreciate that gender-based violence and even the response to it did not start in 2018. Efforts were put in place to have appropriate legislation in place. That's why we had the Domestic Violence Act. We had the sexual harassment case law in place. So we put in place legislation and we put in policies to address gender-based violence. However, in our attempt to address gender-based violence, we did not take a 365 holistic approach towards ending it, right? So you worked in silos in trying to address gender-based violence, and for the longest of time nothing happened because we neglected one of the pillars or leg towards ending gender-based violence in looking at its prevention and what are the strategies and interventions that you should put in place to prevent it from happening. So if you can't be cosmetic about it, you have to go to the root cause of all of these things. And the root cause of why we have high levels of violence in this country, especially gender-based violence, is because of patriarchy and power and inequality, right? And we wanted to bring in a human rights perspective into it. So in 2018, when you had the hashtag the total shutdown march, it's when we as civil society organization felt the need that government has to respond and respond differently this time. And I'll tell you why it was different and why now we see many people engaging with the topic, not shying away from it. And in fact, it has given many victims, those who have been victims of gender-based violence to openly talk about their experiences, openly share what has happened to them. So it's precisely that I think it's a step in the right direction. It's also forcing the law enforcement agencies and the entire criminal justice system to look at their system and see what are the systemic challenges that makes it impossible for them to have convictions, because part of that work being done by the criminal justice system is also to serve as a deterrence so that we stop it. So once a perpetrator is fully aware that the law is effective, and that once a case is reported of rape is reported, of a case of assault is reported, a case of sexual harassment is reported, that the swiftness and the urgency that is dealt with, that in itself, once we see that happening, it start to serve as a deterrent, because people know that there are consequences.
And not a moment too soon. In closing, then, we do know that Parliament, government has introduced a gender-based desk. Do you think that's going to further our cause regarding, the gender-based issues that we experience on a very large scale here in the country, particularly femicide and gender-based violence of all forms? I mean, I could even argue that a male boss or a male partner speaking to me very harshly or dismissively is a gender-based violence. Wouldn't you agree?
And that's what we want to focus on. I suppose most of the time we get lost in the language, and so when we say gender-based violence, we are not, we should be able to unpack it for people to understand what we mean in that basket of gender-based violence. What is in that basket? So it includes bullying, it includes cyber bullying, it includes harassment, sexual harassment, it includes screaming at someone and in perpetuity, that you at work you become, you can't function any longer because you work with a boss that is just so intransigent and bullies you on a daily basis. That violence in itself. So what we're looking for, and when you talk of humanity, it's about compassion. It's about hearing the other side, and being able, once you transgress all of that, that you should be held accountable, irrespective of whether you are the boss or not the boss. And that's what we talk about impunity, that people do these things because they think they can get away with them, right? They,
Mm.
I'm the boss in the organization, you'll never do anything to me. And I want to say to everyone else listening to this podcast this morning, to understand that we all have recourse, and the recourse is not just in law, and it's you being able to share all of that with different organizations that do this work. So once you bring it to our attention, we are able to take it up and challenge that pattern of abuse that is happening in the workplace. In the workplace, every workplace is supposed to have a sexual harassment policy. It's supposed to take its employees through the procedures and processes that should be followed once an employee is subjected to sexual harassment or any bullying of any nature. We are now, as South Africa, signatory to the ILO C190, which is now a convention that deals with violence in the workplace, and it extends and really broadens the violence that happens in the workplace, and workers in every workplace must be aware of that. They must exercise their rights, and not be scared to stand up and speak out about the abuse and the bullying that happens at work. At work.
Interesting indeed. So, if I find, or anybody listening to us this morning realizes that they are in a situation like that, the realization dawns on them that, oh my goodness me, all these years my boss has been bullying me, and that is why I'm so stressed out. They can come to you at Wise for Africa, and you will take up the case. You will act on that person's behalf, and then approach the company and lodge a complaint, I should imagine, or set up a meeting and start early discussions. If the person is adamant that he hasn't been bullying the opposite party, the opposite sex, what happens then? I mean, he stands his ground and say she's imagining it, or that's not how I meant, or this is the way I speak all the time, etc., etc. How does one go forward with something like that?
So in cases like those, and we have done quite a few, where the first thing that we ask a victim of such is to tell us what justice looks like for them, right? Once we know and understand that. So if justice for you is to eyeball the person who has been bullying you, and you want to tell them about how you feel, and once you have done that, you are okay. That's where we leave it, right? In other instances, and it's important for all of us to understand, because justice looks different for all of us, right? For someone, justice will be an eye for an eye. The other person's just, I just want this person to hear me, to understand how they made me feel, right? And I want to bring them into a room with HR executives so that I can freely tell them how his conduct over time has made me feel and what it has done to myself. And most victims of harassment and bullying that we have assisted, that has helped them because all that they needed was to be heard. And I think it's an important point to make, because sometimes people think that we want to destroy people's lives, and we are lying when we say this is what I've been subjected to. And all that the person wants is to say, I was not imagining this thing. Is that it happened to me? Is that you touched me inappropriately? You screamed at me all the time. And in most instances, there are other people who can corroborate your version, because they might have been also subject of that bullying in a different way. So in certain instances, the matter stops once you have said, I want to be heard, and you are heard. In other instances, the matter proceeds, and you get witnesses who can corroborate your version, and the company has to make a decision and a finding on the merits that have been presented by both parties.
Okay, so it's really about setting boundaries. It
Yeah,
might even be as simple as just getting an apology from the person, from the
yeah.
perpetrator, and then you move ahead. What happens, and my final question to you, Brenda, what happens in a home setting where you have a brother or a spouse or a
Mhm.
relative in a shared home setting, and you find you're being bullied all the time, and the person refuses to hear you and just screams down at you all the time? What recourse has a person got in that type of situation?
And
Can
you
they
know,
still
so
come? Can they still come to Wise for Africa?
and we'll give them advice on what are the options available for them. Intimate partner violence, and is the one that happens at home most of the time, right?
Right,
So that's why it's
right.
called. It's the highest everywhere in the world. uh, and 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 so what happens in the home most of the time is that victims of that kind of violence will take it for the longest of time, because they think it's they've got there's no way out for them, right? And that's why most women die in relationships, because they kept on making excuses for their partners, right? We keep on making excuses for an uncle who we know is abusing a child, and because it's in the family setting, we don't want to rock the boat, so we don't want even to report that. So the changes in the law at the moment with the amendments to the Domestic Violence Act is that once, if for instance I'm at home, I'm subjected to bullying that leads then to physical violence, and I present myself to a social worker or a doctor, and they can see that I have been violated, they now have an obligation to report, right, on your behalf, because most people are too scared, especially in an intimate in an intimate partner relationship, where it's still boyfriend, girlfriend, husband and wife, and not knowing where to go because there are children involved, and you don't want to you are reliant on your husband or your partner support you. And that's another form of abuse, which is financial abuse, because once
Mm.
someone does that to you, that continuously abuses you emotionally, but abuses you physically, by just all the time screaming and shouting at you, but also using money, because you don't have your own income. That's a form of abuse. We assist those victims with protection orders, right? One of the challenges around the protection orders has been, um, women are expected to leave the home, right? Because you need to find a safe place for yourself to avoid that situation, right? And so, do we have enough shelters in the country to accommodate most of the victims of such of child violence? We don't, right? And so we have been propagating for a situation where it shouldn't be the woman who leaves the home. Once it's established that the husband is the aggressor or the partner is the aggressor, they should be given time to be out of the home, attend counseling, attend all that they need to attend, before a final protection order is given. So once an interim protection order is given, the aggressor must undergo certain things so that they can then come back into the home or not come back to the home, because parties have decided that they are parting ways. So there's recourse, but when it comes to intimate partner violence, we need to take into account that it's very intimate, and once the emotions involved, and it's about people we say we love, we sometimes very reluctant to act against them.
Okay, I think that's all we have time for. Thank you indeed. And here's thumbs up for the 16 days of no violence against women and children, the 16 days of activism. Absolute pleasure talking with you, Brenda. Advocate Brenda Madumise, Director of WISE for Africa. Thank you and go well. It
Thank you
is
very much, and all the best.
it is exactly 8 after 10 o'clock. Time for me to wrap up. I was going to share some information with you as I wrap up this morning, but it's quite long winded and we don't have time for it. But let me just give you a heads up on it. Um, Advocate Mohammed Salim Khan, based in Durban, who has been a regular guest on our shows here at Salam Media, has put out a statement regarding the Muslim marriage bill. That was initiated, of course, by the Al Jamaa Party, and which is going for its, the first reading in Parliament, which we covered on yesterday or the day before show with uh, with um, with someone from with the legal representative from Al Jamaa. Subsequent to that, and I think for a while now, Advocate Mohammed Salim Khan has been following this issue. He has a totally opposing view to this matter, and he is of the view that this Muslim marriages bill goes to Sharia law. I did want to have him on the show this morning. Unfortunately, he's in court this morning. But the good news is that he is available tomorrow. So Inayat Wadi will be picking up this interview with Advocate Salim Khan, Mohammed Salim Khan. Please, please, please make sure you listen into that particular interview. It is very important indeed. It impacts on you and I and every Muslim regarding the Muslim marriage bill and Sharia law. So please stay tuned to that interview tomorrow. If you do miss it, of course, the podcast will be available. And of course, we do ask you, our esteemed viewers and listeners, to subscribe to our YouTube page. And on that note, then, I wrap up by thanking the production team, that's you, Tolani and Nasreen Naidu. We'll wrap up by a beautiful recitation from the Holy Quran by Sheikh Ahmed Al Ajmi. Till next week, Monday, at the same time, as always, take care. Allah be with each and every one of us on the roads and wherever we may be. It's exactly 10 after 10. Assalamu alaikum and Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Ali.